I found the new Five Nights at Freddy's game before its release. The company behind Five Nights at Freddy's more recent projects, Steelwool Studios, have gone on to reveal to us exactly what to expect in terms of a game no one else knows about. Our huge information dump starts with their interview from November 4th, where members of the official team told us what to look out for. I would love to go back and see how things would be. I'm thinking 70s. An Origins game that would shed light on the early days of Fazbear Entertainment that have served as a more gray area we don't have many details about until today. If we're meant to fully jump on this 70s inspired origin story, we'd need proof of its involvement, which we don't have, unless... You see, foreshadowing characters and designs for future games is nothing unfamiliar to this franchise. Security Breach is a great example of this, as one of the most iconic characters of the bunch, or his smaller counterpart at least, actually originated in Pizzeria Simulator. But that could very well be a fluke, right? Oh, sister location room. Yes, it's here too. But if there was meant to be a connection further down the line to this 70s themed Fazbear Entertainment origin story game, we'd need proof of them leaving in assets for the future. Little clues or potential Easter eggs. And the man himself, from our Steelwool interview, basically spells it all out for us. He goes on to tell us about his favorite recent Easter egg no one has even discovered yet. It told us this future game teasing habit could very well still be something to look out for. And it's right under our nose. That's when it was uncovered. You see, playing through our most recent game of the bunch, Ruin, leads us to one of the more confusing endings we're able to access. It's officially called the Brazil ending in the files, and unlocking it requires you to run away from the Mimic and ignore the instructions we're given on the walkie-talkie, instead choosing to walk into a cutout of Fredbear holding 2 ice cream cones. Obviously this thing is going to be important if it goes hand in hand with uncovering a way of finishing the game, but it gets even more interesting when we head into its files. You see, this cutout isn't just named Freddy Ice Cream, it's named 70s Freddy Ice Cream. If you recall anything from Steelwool's interview discussing future games, it should be the very detail that an Origins game would be associated with the 70s. Why would they leave this detail in unexplained, you may ask? Maybe because it's not the only evidence we have towards this new Origins game. It was revealed that in addition to this, there was a white box map within Ruin's files that raises a lot of question marks in terms of its involvement. It's another one of these randomly placed puzzle pieces that only make sense if we put them all together. You see, this specific white box map is associated with the word carnival in the files. It's found in the same sinkhole area we continue to navigate to get to the Fredbear ending, the cutout that served as a big clue, and sure enough, they actually connect in a way. The white box map follows the very theme that would correlate with the same old school concept we've actually seen before. This is important with our origin story, Fredbear's singing show. The associated poster tells us it's made in the same ticketed performance setup that one would typically expect to see in a carnival-like attraction. Having the presence of this carnival detail could tell us we're meant to be expecting a sort of blast from the franchise's past if this is where their early business days began. The theme even ties back to one of our main mascot costumes we see in the Mimic's lair, the main antagonist, as we don't have much of an explanation for its seemingly random appearance. Throw in the same matching merchandise release and you've got yourself a pretty strong connection to a 70s inspired carnival game. But that's where our huge problem comes into play. We're not done yet. You see, the theory world of FNAF have recently tied many of these similar concepts to the idea of Circus Baby's Pizza World in the form of our next game, the already announced sequel to Help Wanted. This is important to set straight as it could destroy the entire possibility of our other new game. But linking all the evidence to Help Wanted 2 fails to include the explanation for the year 1970 and the specific word choice of carnival from our files. I'd argue that the word carnival better fits with the idea of the old singing show that'd be tied with our new game origin concept, as it was a sort of carnival attraction made up of the animal acts and food services that would likely bunch it into the category rather than a fully fledged circus. The founder's humble beginnings. And the evidence actually seems to agree. A Twitter user points out how going through the Silver Eyes tells us one of the 2 original company founders, Henry, was discovered to have a book detailing the history of the traveling carnival and of the circus. But William Afton is the other original founder credited with the creation of the fun times, of the Pizza World Circus, then what sense would it make to attribute Henry, the other founder, to this carnival idea? The same idea from our files, unless it was left here to give us the same connection to our 70s carnival attraction instead. That's right, 1970. The finding from the files that additionally doesn't match up with Circus Baby's Pizza World, which was created later on, as 1970 is also likely the year that the Singing Bear show, as I mentioned, was actually in operation. But how do I know? Well, mid-1970s restaurant poster depictions are colored, opposed to the black and white posters for the early on performance, meaning it makes sense that the posters for the singing show were created first. And it's no secret in terms of ticket price, Henry wasn't necessarily the best with money. But it perfectly makes sense timeline-wise to say it was right before the creation of Fredbear's Family Diner, as it could have been established soon after as a sort of transition between businesses, as it fits perfectly together with the owner's previous endeavors featuring the Bear Show, with food and drink featured, eventually turning into what we see later on in the timeline. They very well could have started as a smaller little business that was less of a restaurant and more of a carnival attraction, before finding success and deciding to scale it up into something new, something different. This is our whole origin story right here. Meaning, in terms of a 70s inspired game meant to clear up the past of Fazbear Entertainment, this concept matches right up. But this is when we actually get to the biggest aspect of this entire thing. What would we have to expect towards this game in the first place? It's not like we'd be expecting a bear singing simulator karaoke game, unless that's what you're into. We'd be expecting what we know from all our previous details. Just because our theme of the 70s would be meant to come into play regarding this new installment, it wouldn't necessarily mean the new game would also have to take place in the 70s, with the focus from Steelwool on clearing up an untold story from the early days of Fazbear Entertainment's endeavors. They could accomplish this mission in an entirely different in-game time period, one in which new animatronic models would come into play. Because of the way our similar games are laid out, we see how 90s inspired animatronic models can be used later in the timeline, in the case of Security Breach. So a re-theme or build off of our original origin story foundation based on the 70s could lead us to something similar to the balloon circus models. Perhaps a brand new yet familiar rendition that would fit the theme and provide us with details about the founder's past and how everything in Fazbear Entertainment truly came to be. The biggest Easter eggs. But you see, that's not the end of the story. In terms of Easter eggs meant to reveal hidden aspects of these games, there's actually even more that have gone unnoticed. For everything you need to know, make sure to watch my deep dive.